Joe, I don't know what's more exciting, what I have to talk about or what you did talk about. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I'm always worried at one of these sessions that, nobody comes. And I told Joe earlier today, it could be he and I, and we'd just have a nice chat, and that would be okay. So I'm here today to talk to you about FinOps for analytics and AI, and what we're doing about FinOps and how we're evolving our practice as those two areas within our world are specifically growing. So why does it matter? Well, interestingly, when they asked me to be sure and add a slide about who am I, because I'm not really here to talk about me, I'm here to talk about what we're doing at work. But the fact remains, from the bottom up, I started over on the DBA side, database administration, which was all about data, moved over into the cloud side, and one of the things that I did as a part of the cloud side, which I talked about last year, was launch the big FinOps team. And we launched our whole practice, and I say big in air quotes because the big FinOps team was about 5 people. And we had global responsibility for all of our cloud platforms and ingesting the bill and doing the cost allocation of the bill and getting that out to all of the business units. And so as I built this team and we implemented tooling, et cetera, which you'll see in a few pages, that was super exciting, and I thought that was going to be the highlight. But little did I know, after that was done, I moved over to the data and analytics side. And our data and analytics platform is what's feeding all of our analytics dashboards and AI and all of the pieces on top, which then made it even more exciting, not only to build, but then when you look at the cloud bills that come with it, you think, oh, we need some work to do here. And so what we're going to talk about today is how we started, which was basically last year's session in one slide, 2 minutes, and then where we're going with the new organization that we built and how we're leveraging these FinOps services in which to gain control and enhance the control that we had over the cloud spend. So we'll talk about the evolution, we'll talk about our enterprise data environment, and then next steps in the journey. Because for anybody who's been doing FinOps for a while, you know you're never done. You just reach a phase and then you go on to the next one. It never really ends. And right when you think you optimized everything, somebody comes and builds something new. And then you have to start all over again. So I hope this slide needs no text. I hope that you all are very familiar with our products and are in fact indulging in those products here in the Marriott Hotel as we speak. I had a bottle of water to bring up with me, but I had nowhere to put it, so sadly I did not. So the evolution. What we did over the initial couple of years was build, whoops, went one page too far. Okay, a page is missing, that's okay. We'll talk to it anyway. We built the centralized FinOps organization, which had, like I say, 4 or 5 people responsible for bringing in the data from the cloud bills, doing the allocation to all the business units, and then we built a Power BI dashboard. We launched this service offering called a Cloud Cost Consult, where we ran around the world and said to everybody, here's your cloud cost, here's how you're trending between now and year end if you do nothing. You're gonna go up if you build more stuff. Here are the optimization recommendations that we think are applicable to your environment, so hey, let's go talk about those, right? And I say, hey, let's go talk about those, not, hey, let's go do those. Because if you're part of the FinOps Foundation, you probably are familiar with their podcasts that they do. And there's a really good podcast, it's about 2 years old now, called FinOps. And it tells the story of several FinOps organizations who went and did optimizations. And they didn't know everything about those optimizations. And in a couple of cases, they took down production environments that then they had to spend weekends restoring. So it was always my mantra as a part of the FinOps team, hey, we're not gonna go do anything. We're gonna drive communication, build relationships and collaboration, and say to people, hey, this is what we think is applicable to your world, but let's talk about it. Is it really applicable? So we built this service, and then we launched this cloud cost optimization, and in addition to our Flexera dashboards, which is the tool that we use for all of our cloud spend management, we built a Power BI dashboard supporting this cloud cost console. And in the Power BI dashboard, we showed you what your spend was, and we showed you all the different ways that you could optimize, right? And whether that was buying a reservation or a commitment, whether that was downsizing a VM, whether that was changing how you use services, whether that was getting rid of stuff that wasn't used, we'd share it all with you and people would make their decisions, and we drove tremendous savings as a result of that. Usually when I talk about the optimization of cloud costs, somebody will come back and ask, well, what about sustainability? Yes, sustainability goes with that. And we're working on that dashboard within our tooling as we speak to build out the sustainability dashboard from a global perspective, mirroring all the cloud spend across the various platforms. That piece isn't done yet, so this is sort of a representative generic sample. When we get that piece done, maybe next year, we'll come back and share that as well. So after I built this whole team, and we ran around the world sharing all this information, I thought we were good to go. But then I moved to the dark side. I moved over to the biggest business unit that we had that was consuming the cloud spend or generating the cloud spend, depending on your viewpoint. And so that is what we call our enterprise data foundation. And this is what we're building on the PepsiCo side to ingest all the data from the source systems to provide the data for the analytics and the AI. And the challenge with that is cost can go very quickly because we're a global organization, as you probably are aware. We're also made up of acquisitions, like many of you are. And so when you have those different perspectives and you want to do something as simple as, say, reporting on sales, right? That can get tricky because sales come from a lot of different places. It comes from different business units. It comes from different countries. It can come in different currencies. It can come based on different SKUs. And as you try to mush it all together, that could be challenging. So I came over to be the product owner of this enterprise data foundation. And part of product ownership, of course, is understanding your cost model. Just like if you're a product owner for any software product, like Databricks was just up here before me, or if you're the product owner in the context of a manufacturing line, you have to know what's your cost. And in my case, not only what is my cost, but how am I attributing that back internally to the groups that I'm servicing? And then if you're selling your product externally, how are we attributing that cost to the customer? So what we follow is this methodology related to bronze, silver, and gold, which is a standard methodology. It's out there on the internet. You can just Google it. It's not special to us. On the bronze side, we bring in the data from the source systems. And we're looking to just grab it as is, and then we take that and move it into the silver layer, which is where we do a lot of the aggregation and standardization, et cetera, so that if you're looking to do something like sales, you don't have to go grab it from all these different countries. We'll mush it together for you. And then based on what's in silver, that's available to our product teams as they're developing products to consume, and then it gets moved over to gold. And that's the consumption layer, where they're using the data to create their digital products. And those digital products may be related to an analysis of flavors, right? We've all seen different flavors of chips, I hope, different flavors of soda, I hope, and our analysis in terms of what's gonna sell big based on season or based on location or whatever it may be. So as a part of the product ownership, I really needed to understand the cost model. And now that I do understand the cost model, I'm on a mission to reduce it. And so as a part of that, not only do I have to share the costs with the people whose data we're consuming, I have to share the costs with the people who are building the data products on top of my world. And of course, their first question is, oh, that's the cost? Why does it cost so much? And what are you gonna do about that? Which is where we go to next. So it's interesting for me to, on the one side, I built it with the team that I had. Now I'm over consuming it, and I'm the biggest consumer. And so it was really a good test for us to see, or at least for me to see, for what we built, did it really work? And if it didn't work, what enhancements did we need to make? Thankfully for me, it did work. And it gave me really the first view so I could really jump in and understand the cloud cost underneath my data products, so that we can in turn go for the optimization. The interesting thing about this whole bronze, silver, gold thing is that it's super helpful to share the data. Because if you can imagine, everybody and their brother wants a copy of the data to do reporting. And then you can get into really high costs with respect to duplicate data over and over again. So we really want to bring in one copy and just share it so that everybody uses it. That's great to reduce cost. But if you're anywhere along in your FinOps journey, you've all heard the word tagging, tagging, tagging. And you have to do tagging in order to get your cloud billing right, correct? Well, that's great when everybody owns their own thing. You want the employee data? Great. We'll bring it in, tag it to you. You want the employee data? Great. We'll bring it in, tag it to you, right? Now our cost is higher because we have it multiple places, but hey, it's tagged, so we know who to bill for it. What we're building here is more of a shared environment, so we're reducing the cost, but there's extra complexity because even if you tag it, that doesn't tell you how to bill it because it's shared. And how do you allocate the cost of something that's shared, right? If you do it like a taxi cab, it's per use. And that's easy to do if you know who's using it. If you know who's running the jobs, if you know that some people are running really big jobs and some people are running really small jobs, and how do you allocate that cost? So it's got great benefits in terms of having one set of data, one set of the truth, if you will, so you don't have to chase, oh, well, I produced sales yesterday. I produced sales 3 days ago. My data's a week old. Oh, well, my data didn't include this country, right? And then you spend all your time chasing after that. Now we have one copy, which is great. We have standardized data quality, so we know the quality of the data is good. But now you have a challenge in terms of the very bottom piece. How do you allocate the costs? And who do you allocate it to? So, what do we do about that? Oh, here's the missing slide, which was the centralized and decentralized team. So what you can take out of this in the data and analytics little circle there, or the biggest circle of the bunch, is that now became our job as the biggest cloud consumer to go look at what are our costs, how do we allocate them properly across all the people using the data, and then how do we optimize that, right? Because it's nifty. What the centralized FinOps team does is produce the big dashboard that says, hey, you're spending X dollars. What I want to know as the product owner is, great, I'm spending X dollars. What am I spending it on? All these different pieces, and what are my options to reduce that cost, which is what we go for. So as we feed this data, we have a couple of challenges that we need to go after, right? The first one is, yeah, we want one set of data. We want to bring it in one time, and we want everybody to share it. But oh, by the way, we want you to pay for it too. And granted, you're sharing the data, so it's a lower cost, but there's a control freak thing in there, right? People want to control their data. They want to know when it's refreshed. They want to say, hey, I want my data refreshed at 2 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock, right? And so getting people to give up that control so that you can have one set of shared data can be challenging. The other piece is the whole tagging thing, right? Because even if you tag it, it's not going to help you because it's shared. And so you have to look at different allocation models, right? And it can say, okay, you two use it, I'm going to split it 50-50. And then one of you is going to come back and say, yeah, but I use it once a month, and he uses it every day. So I'm not splitting it 50-50. I want a different allocation model. And then somebody else is going to come and say, well, I use it every day, but I only use this much. That person that uses it only once a month, they use this much, so they should pay more. So we're all going to argue about the cost allocation model, right? So yes, as adults, we will all sit in the room and argue about where these pennies need to go. Because of course, when it's coming in, it's 5 cents a minute or whatever the magic number is, which adds up as you go over time, and suddenly that 5 cents a minute becomes really critical. So one set of data, single source of truth, but you have to split the cost. And so we had 2 challenges with respect to this. The first one is, how do we split the cost accurately in a way that everybody's going to buy into? And then the second piece is, of course, now that you split it, well, now you need to reduce it. It's too high. What are you going to do about that? So those are the pieces that we're looking into, and I'll share with you what we've done, what we're going to do with respect to that. Because all this data that we brought in from the source systems is feeding all the analytics and AI. And you want to be sure when you're feeding all the analytics and AI that you have the right data. Because you know what happens when you feed the AI and you train your models and the data was wrong? You have to go train it all again. And so now you got to pay twice. You paid to train it the first time, you got to pay to train it again. So we don't want to do that. We want to be sure we have the right data in the right place so that we can reduce that cost. So how do we go about it? Well, we have several things that we look at, and these aren't a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's why they don't have numbers. Because we look at all of these together and figure out what we're going to go after first. So the first one is replication. We don't want to replicate data. You've heard me say single source, like 5 times already, and I've only been here 10 minutes. But the fact is, you may want multiple places, because if you need a disaster recovery strategy, or DR, you have to replicate to another region. If you want an HA strategy, or high availability, you have to replicate at least to another availability zone. So I don't mean sacrifice those 2 things, because you may need those. My bigger question would be, do you need it for everything? Or do you need it for some things? For example, while you may want DR or HA for a production environment, do you really need it for non-prod? Because it's really silly to replicate all that all over the place if you don't need it. So we look at that specifically in terms of what do we replicate, how do we replicate it, where do we replicate it, and what do we not need to replicate, and make sure we're not, because that would be a waste of money. And those are kind of the first 2 bullets, right? Carrying data that you don't need, replicating data that you don't need, specifically. The other piece is storage, right? And so when you look at analytics and AI, it's all storage, storage, storage. But data is more than just the storage, because we've got the reports. And you know what happens when you need to create and run all these reports and Power BI dashboards or whatever other dashboards you're using? You need compute cycles in which to aggregate more data and mush it all together and do things that way. And so what we look at specifically is, for the data that we have, are we actually using it? Because, sometimes you have to sit on data for like 10 years for tax reasons or something. Okay, fine, you don't have a choice, you have to do that. But if you're sitting on other data that you're not using, you're paying for that, and that's a waste of money. The reports have the same problem. Everybody and their brother creates their own report, because they want to control it. They want to know when it refreshes. They want to know, exactly what's in there. So nobody wants to share, everybody wants their own report. But then you end up with all this extra cost for all these reports. And the reports take storage as well. So we actually look at the reports and who's using them and how often they run. And hey, are there reports that haven't run in 6 months or a year? Because we can kill that. Or hey, are there newer reports to replace the older reports? Because then we can kill that. And we can potentially kill the source of data there as well. And so then we can look at the cost optimization on that size. Also look at storage tiering, right? When we have the need that we need to bring in multiple sources, and we need to save them for a long time, say for tax purposes, let's face it, you can sit on it for 10 years, but in year 8, how many people do you think access it? Not a whole lot. So we look for the coldest storage possible in those cases to optimize the cost there as well. We also look at the commitments using the focus word, because now I've been in 2 sessions this week that are specifically on focus. The keynote had a lot of focus than the previous one did. So we look at the commitments, and it's easier to just go with commitments than it is to go with the reservations and the savings plans and the pre-purchase, the drawdown that you do. I mean, depending on what platform you're on, everybody calls it something different. And the fact is, those commitments can do a tremendous amount in reducing your costs. But you better make sure that you're going to sit on something that long. And that's a conversation that we have a lot with respect to, I have a recommendation where I should do a 1-year reservation. And the FinOps team, if it were just up to them, may very well go execute that. But here's the problem. As the product owner, I know that those services are only going to live for another 6 months, because they're going to be replaced by a next version of something. So purchasing the reservation is the wrong thing to do, because my stuff is going away and I don't want the reservation. On the flip side, if you do the math, maybe doing the 1-year purchase will save you money in comparison to paying the pay-as-you-go cost for 6 months. And so to me, it's a straight math problem, right? My kids used to always ask, when they would have to take algebra and everything, do you really use this in the real world? Yes, we do. Do the math. If I buy the reservation and I pay for 6 months I don't need, am I still going to save money versus a pay-as-you-go rate for 6 months? Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay. So we look at the reservations because that's kind of the easy button, right? But we also look at the storage, we look at the compute, we look at all of those pieces, right sizing, getting rid of stuff that we don't need, et cetera. And of course, in the bottom, you can see, as I said, we use the Flexera tool. So they have policies with respect to Databricks. Databricks happens to be what we use, right? But the same concepts apply, whether you're doing other cloud native services, Snowflake or whatever. There are policies to optimize that cost. There are tools to optimize those costs as well. I happen to be sitting next to somebody earlier who has one of those tools. So I learned all about it waiting for the previous session. So we have to look at all of those different pieces, and that's what we're executing on to reduce the cost of this data and analytics environment in support of the AI. So we look at different screens, different views, different dashboards, right? And I'll show you some high-level pictures here. It doesn't have the dollars because, of course, they're fuzzied out, but you can kind of get a feel for. We look at cost by business unit, right? As I said, I moved into the biggest business unit now. So whatever report we prepare, I'm always on top. Not a good place to be. You want to be on the bottom of those reports so that you can sort of go under the radar, if you will. So we look by business unit. We also look by service types, right? How much of our spend is in storage, how much is in compute, all of the other different SKUs that you can look at, especially for AI, which we'll talk about in a second with the GPU costs, et cetera. Because we want to look at it in terms of A, does it make sense? Where the heaviest spend lies. And that helps us to zero in on what we're going to go after, right? Because one of the things from the FinOps Foundation, right, is don't go after everything at once, right? So go for specific areas and kind of iterate through the whole thing. That's why I say you're never done, because you have to keep going through that. So we look at it in this way. We also built an internal tool. And here's the interesting thing about the internal tool. It goes down below where Flexera goes. Because we can look at data by job, we can look at data by environment, and there are two key learnings that we got from that, which are super relevant. The first one is, when you're looking at cost optimization, you don't necessarily need to run non-prod workloads the same way you run production. And in many cases, those are pay-as-you-go services, and you're paying by the use. So even if we're loading production every 15 minutes, twice a day, every day, whatever it is, do we really need to load non-prod in the same way? Because these are analytic environments, of course, it's all about load and how much you load versus the operational systems, which have different metrics. And so we achieved a great amount of optimization by simply changing how we were running non-prod. When you're in the middle of a hot development environment for a product or a project, whatever terminology you use, you may need to load constantly, mirroring production, so that you can be sure whatever you're developing from a product perspective is correct and gets out the door. Once it's done and you're kind of in a maintenance mode, you don't need it as often. But nobody remembers to go back. And I don't want to say shut that stuff off, because the developers and the engineers still need it, but they don't need it as often. And so simply by changing things to run a couple times a week instead of every day or multiple times a day, there was cost savings there. The other thing that's super interesting about this dashboard that we built is when you look at job failures. I'll tell you, as a FinOps person, I wasn't really focused on job failures because, in all honesty, why would I care? That's an engineering development thing. I don't care if their jobs fail, right? They just have to rerun them because I wasn't part of that team. But here's the interesting thing about that. If it's a pay-as-you-go environment, you have jobs that run, you pay for them to run. If they fail and you have to rerun, you pay for it again. So suddenly we did really care about how often jobs fail. Not only because are we meeting the SLAs or not, but hey, because we have to pay twice or 3 times if jobs fail. And you know, if it's a 30-second job and it fails in the first 2 seconds, okay, fine. You know, who's counting at that point? But if it's a long-running job, it's an hour-long job and it fails at minute 45, depending on your retry logic, if you have to restart it from scratch, you pay to do the same thing again. And if it fails again, you do it again. The other thing that we have noticed in the past is that sometimes people grab multiple years of data to load. which seems correct. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? You get it in one shot, boom, bring it in. However, if the previous years don't change that often, and again, pay-as-you-go environment, you're paying to reload that history over and over again when it hasn't changed. And while it does create a more complicated environment for an engineer or developer to only bring in data that changed, it may be worth doing it that way so that you don't have to pay to reload the same data over and over and over again that doesn't change. So we got down to that kind of level to look at stuff and have had great success in optimizing from that perspective. Those are pieces that the centralized FinOps team wouldn't know because they don't know the environment the way the developers and engineers who built it and support it know it. Those are things that you have to be really close to the product at hand to understand what it's doing and why it's doing it to make those changes. So we looked at these different viewpoints. We created an executive dashboard as well, so the execs could go look at it if they wanted to, so that they could see and drill down into not only are we meeting the business SLAs, but what are the cost implications of doing so? And where do we have challenges that we want to go after with respect to these different reports? And what's causing cost increases because we have to run multiple times. So the topic at hand for today, right, was FinOps for analytics and AI. Two ways to look at that from a FinOps Foundation perspective, right? One is AI for FinOps. Of course, we all want AI for FinOps. It will make our job easier. So whatever tool you use, I have Flexera, you all may have other tools. Every tool in the world out there right now has an AI offering. And if they haven't delivered it, they will be soon. And so we're certainly interested in those AI offerings as a part of the existing tooling that we have so that we can leverage the AI not only to monitor and tell us where we need to take action, but at some level we're looking for the AI to do the action for us. That could be a really interesting proposition if it's going to resize SKUs or whatever that cause outages. So you have to look at that piece really carefully. But we want that AI to be analyzing our environments and to give us those recommendations. So that's coming in our tool. It's coming in lots of other tools as well. What we're really looking at on the other side of the house is how we do FinOps for AI. AI is the biggest cost consumer right now. If you were in the keynote this morning, I believe he said it went from 30-something% to like 63%. And so how do we optimize the cost for the AI? And so obviously, when I talk to the AI team, they're like, oh, yeah, GPU cost, token cost, it's a big hit. And so we had to look at what are we doing about that. And so we started writing dashboards and analysis to monitor those pieces. When we look at the data that we're bringing in, we're analyzing what data is coming in, and is it the right data? Can that data support multiple use cases for AI? Or do we need different data coming through? And making sure that the data is validated from a quality perspective before we actually use it. And that's an important piece, right? Because again, if you train your models and whatnot on a data set that you find out didn't have the right level of quality, well, now you have to do it again. So when you talk about data quality, right, is the data coming in meeting business requirements? Do you have salaries that are null? If you do, I hope it's not mine, because that would be a bad thing, right? But you know, somebody who's doing an analysis of employees, if they have null salaries or zero salaries or missing salaries, right, then the analysis is going to be wrong, that kind of thing. Do you have products with sales of zero? What do we do about that? Maybe people want that because they want to look at what products are not selling, zero sales, right? Why do we still make those products? On the flip side, if somebody's doing averages, those zeros just skew everything. And so then they run it and they go, oh yeah, that's not what I wanted, now I gotta run it again. And therefore now we have more costs. So as a part of being the product owner or PO, I need to look at how is everybody doing this? What are they doing with the data? How are they running, et cetera? What are the guardrails that we have around FinOps? Because FinOps needs to be a part of what everybody's thinking about. It isn't just, hey, let me run my reports. Hey, let me build my AI chatbot or whatever it's going to be using this data. But what is the TCO of doing so? right? And are we going to deliver against the return on investment? And we'll talk about the POCs for those AI activities in a second. We also need to look at, from a model perspective, what's the data drift? Do you need to refresh every week? How do you know you need to refresh every week? Are you monitoring the data drift to make sure that the data changes every week so that it's worth it or not? And this gets into the whole discovery of people who were loading 3 years of data or 5 years of data when that history didn't change. And I'm like, why are you loading it? Well, because maybe it did change. Can you figure out what changed? You know, it costs a heck of a lot less to figure out what changed and only bring in that piece than it does for you to reload all this history. And therefore then retrain, refresh, reports, et cetera, if the data hasn't changed. So you have to look at the drift and make sure it's warranted. And of course, managing consumption. So for us, internally, we want to charge everybody for everything. So when we build something, we charge the people who we built it for. And so whether that's a monthly subscription fee, whether that's like $5 for usage, et cetera. And it's the same thing, you know, using ChatGPT, right? For a while, ChatGPT is free. And then suddenly it's not. I know this not so much from work, but from my college kids using it. When they come back and say, well, you know, now I need the paid version. Like, why do you need the paid version? Well, because I got a boatload of homework. And the free version isn't cutting it anymore. So yeah, well, are we going to charge per user? Are we going to charge per API call? What are we going to charge internally for people to use the different services? And you have to balance that with, well, if we charge them to use it, are they going to want to use it? Or can they go use some free thing off the internet instead, right? So it's a balance. So we look at our AI solutions and we analyze them in a variety of areas, one of which is, the screen is from Flexera, the cost buckets. What are the top cost buckets that are driving the AI cost up, right? In our case, it was virtual machines, shock of all shocks, right? Because that's where the GPU cost is. And that's where we look at, hey, while you're maybe using that for production, do you really need that for non-prod? Specifically. So we analyze by solution. We also analyze by the top buckets and make sure things feel right. So that's how far we got. And we've been hugely successful in delivering what we're looking to deliver. But we have more work to do. And of course we have more work to do, because otherwise what would drive my invitation to come back next year if we didn't have more work to do to come back and talk about? So, what are we doing with respect to what's coming? Whoops. I don't know if you guys gave me a good clicker or not. First off is the cost allocation piece. What are we going to do about the cost allocation? So we have allocation in place now, but I'm not so sure it's optimal. And so we're going to go after that and look at that in a more granular level of detail and see what is a better way to allocate. Is it by usage, right? And the example that I gave before was, you know, well, you use it once in a month, you use it 30 times in a month, you're going to pay more. Oh yeah, but you know, I use this much data, they use this much data, they should pay more. So we have to have optimal algorithms. We do it by job. Sometimes we do it by user, right? There are lots of different ways. You can do it by space allocated, space used, et cetera. Lots of different ways to allocate costs, but we have to figure out what is the right cost algorithm for all the different services. And so that's one piece of it. The other piece, which is very interesting, is this whole shift left. Everybody always wants to shift left, whether it's operations or anything else. You know, do it sooner, do it faster. We get a lot of requests to bring in data, and that takes time. Whether it's 3 hours, 3 days, 3 months, you could argue all day. But hypothetically speaking, if we need to bring in the data, and we know it's going to take a couple of weeks, you tell us today, you say, hey, I need this data, I need it tomorrow. Well, we can't deliver, because we know it's going to take a couple of weeks. So we have to back up. And you know, if you know you're going to need something at the end of the month, well, you got to tell us a month in advance so we have enough time to do it. And that is terrific, because it helps us to meet the target dates of the customers who are building our internal products. It is not so terrific, because now I have to pay for it 3 or 4 weeks in advance so that I can get it out there for when you need it. So I'm basically paying for it when nobody's using it, which I don't want to do either. So it's kind of a fine line to balance, right? We want to shift left and bring it in early so we're ready, but we don't want to pay for it too far in advance. And the example that I give people with that is in moving from an apartment to a house. right? So today is June 3rd. If your lease is up on June 3rd, you don't buy your house on June 4th. At least I hope you don't, because then you have nowhere to live, and you have a very short time to move all your belongings. So basically, if your lease is up on June 3rd, you kind of have to buy your house in May, and you have an overlap there so that you have time to move, right? But unfortunately, that also means you have to pay a mortgage and rent for the same amount of time. So the shift left thing is a huge win for us in terms of enabling SLAs and target dates, but we have to manage it really closely so that it aligns from a cost perspective because we don't want to waste money. Another piece with respect to the data is, again, this data quality thing. And so we have implemented lots of rules on the data to make sure that the data is meeting our quality requirements before we go off and use it for AI. Because if it's not, the jobs fail, and the data's not there for them to use. But that's okay, because at least then somebody gets notified, somebody knows, and they'll go fix it. What's worse is if the jobs don't fail, and we load data, and it doesn't meet the quality requirements, and somebody goes off and uses it. Not only do we have to pay for them to use it, but they're making a business decision. Maybe they're making a business decision to invest in some big thing, new plant, new trucks, whatever it is, and if they use the wrong data to make the business decision, well, then that's even worse. So we have to really look at the data quality because it's driving cost, even if it's indirectly, which is a big piece. We don't want to train models on wrong data, because then we just have to pay to do it again. The other thing is this whole proof of concept thing. I suspect everybody's been involved with, oh, well, let's do a POC and make sure it works. And if it works, then we'll go build it. Yes, we all do that. What people forget about that POC is maybe it does work. Yay. What did it cost to do the POC? Probably this much. And how's that going to compare to a global rollout? Nobody looks at the cost for the global rollout. So we look at the POC and go, yes, it worked. But is the cost for the global rollout going to be worth it from an ROI perspective? And we have to look at that specifically because I can't tell you how many times somebody will come back with, yeah, it's built, it's great, it works, but why is it so expensive? What can you do to optimize the cost? Hello, FinOps, here we are. Yes, we will optimize your cost, right? So the POC thing is a big deal. We have to make sure that not only are we delivering, but we're delivering to the cost requirements. And in some cases, what I've had to tell people is the cost is right. It is optimized. They said, but we didn't know it was going to cost this much to do it. I'm like, oh, well, of course you didn't. So then your POC, while it validated functionality, it didn't validate the cost for a global rollout and make sure you exceeded the ROI. Yes, that's a problem. So we look at a lot of different pieces, but there's a couple of things on here that are super critical. The first one is the FinOps Foundation has been relatively vocal about proactive FinOps versus reactive FinOps. If you listen carefully, everything I've talked about so far has been mostly reactive. We built it. Now we got to go optimize the cost. But this architecture review piece and this little fuzzy blurb in there is another dashboard that we built that we use to predict cost. And so now when we're building new analytical environments, when we're building new AI products, we have this dashboard and another dashboard specifically where we make people answer all these questions so that we can accurately predict the cost. Because if we predict the cost is going to be $100, and then your cost is $100, you could still come and say it's too expensive and FinOps should optimize it, but we're on target to what we told you. The bigger problem is when it costs $100, but we told you it'd be 10, right? And that's when we get into a lot more trouble. So the proactive FinOps with the architecture review, whether it's analytics or AI, is a really important piece so that you can validate the costs coming out on the other side and make sure they're correct, and then go after the optimization. The other piece regarding the data drift is super important as well, and looking at what data you're using not only to train models and do Power BI reports and all the other fancy stuff we want to do from an analytics perspective, but making sure that you're not just loading data every day, every 15 minutes, whatever it may be, if it's not changing. And really go after just that piece that's changing, even though it may add complexity for the engineers, because then they have to go figure out what's changed and just load those pieces in. And of course, throttling. There was recently an article in LinkedIn, maybe 2 months ago, about some junior developer. I don't know if anybody else read it. Some junior developer turned on something with GPUs on a Friday, went home for the weekend and let it run all weekend. And the people came in on Monday and there was like a $300,000 bill. I don't remember what company it was. But throttling where possible is really important as well, so you can avoid little mishaps like that, because there is no recourse. You're stuck paying the bill if the stuff ran. And so you don't want to leave things up if they're not in use. On the FinOps side, we spent a long time on education for people about running VMs and other services 24/7 if you're not using them. And that was always my mantra, right? When I was on that team and I was building that team, I ran around the world introducing it to everybody and saying, hi, my name is Kim, are you working this weekend? And they would say, no, I've got my kids' soccer team or whatever it is. Oh, great, can you shut down your stuff? Right? And people were like, wow, she's so strange. Yes, but I was after the money and not leaving things up that weren't in use. So throttling is the other piece of that. Don't let stuff run awry, especially on the AI side, because it's expensive, more expensive than other pieces if you're not using it. So in pulling together all of this information, we pulled a lot of inferences, if you will, from a couple of the FinOps links from the FinOps Foundation, right? Because they had a good AI white paper that they had just launched, FinOps for AI, within the past couple of months, at least to me. May have been out there longer. And so these are good links for reference for somebody who's interested in these kind of topics to go refer to. So thanks for coming. I hope you're as interested in FinOps for analytics and AI as I am. And it was nice to share the knowledge with everybody.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. For more FinOps X 2025 content, go check out our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and leave comments and questions for all of our wonderful speakers. We appreciate your support.